Oh, Etymotics and their deep insertion. How much people hate these or love these. Kind of depends on which side you are, whether or not you can tolerate the insertion or not. But for my case, I think for $100, these kick off these star fields way out of my favorite list. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, no questions asked, and by a mile. We'll get into that once we start the review, but before that, I'll just give you a disclaimer. I bought these myself. These are not sold in Indonesia, so I had to get a friend of mine to import them into Indonesia. We bought them from Amazon, got them imported, paid taxes, all those things. I got these at $100 on Amazon. Taxes, etc., made these go all the way up to $140-ish, and even at that price, I think these are still freaking amazing. And yeah, so TLDR of the ER2XRs. They have amazing tonality, basically no soundstage. Insertion is insane, isolation is also insane, and tonality is just amazing. I mean, there's not a lot of things I can complain about in the tonality wise, and they're very pleasing and fun to sound. Fun sound, I would say. Now, for more detail, we'll just get straight into the review, and we'll start off with bass. Bass is usually where people start to, well, that's not the first thing that you think of when you listen to or hear of Etymotics. The first thing that people will say to you is that Etymotics basically don't have bass, which is mostly true for their other lineup, the ER4XRs, the ER4, ER3s. They basically don't have any bass because those are single BA IEMs. The ER2XRs, they have a microdynamic driver, and these punch like crazy. They have emphasized bass quantity, they have a lot of sub bass, which slams hard, and mid bass that punches hard also, and boy do they have quantity. They have bass like nothing I've heard before in terms of this form factor. Sure, bigger IEMs with bigger drivers will have a lot more bass, can have a lot more bass, especially in this price range, but for something so small and a microdynamic driver, I've not heard bass this big. And the bass that they push out also isn't just some mushy garbage, and they are actually nicely textured. Speed is a bit on the medium to slow side. If I were to nitpick here, which is kind of my job, the speed is a bit too slow, a little bit too slow for my preference, but I can totally tolerate that for this price, and in general actually, because these make it feels like it's just a less well-tuned room of a speaker. If you've ever heard that comparison, if you have a room with some speakers, if they're not treated that well, sometimes the bass will just bloom a bit, ever so slightly, and this is kind of what the feeling I get when I hear the ER2XRs. Texture wise, no complaints whatsoever. Texture is plenty, it sounds amazing. I think bass heads, most of the time, I think you'll be pleased with these. If you are more on the neutral camp, you might want to shy away. Probably the ER2SEs will fit you better, which have a lot less bass, but I have not heard them personally, so I cannot directly just recommend you those. If you are coming from the Etymotic ER4XRs or ER3XRs or such, and you like the bass quantity in those, you will not like these. These are the complete opposite. These are the fun kits. These are the fun kits. None of that we represent just the notes. We don't like fun. We are all about studying shit. None of that stuff here. This has big boy bass. Okay, and that does come at a bit of a cost when we're gonna be talking about the mid-range. The bass does bleed a little bit into the mid-range, not that badly, just a bit. It doesn't annoy me. It's definitely there, ever so slightly. But I think the mid-range doesn't get covered up too much, and the mid-range I think is quite nice. I don't have a lot of things to talk about the mid-range because the mid-range is just not offensive. It's just quite thick, quite warm. It falls into what I quite like in terms of tonality. So you're not gonna hear me complaining a lot about the mid-range. Detail retrieval, etc. is also nice. texture, especially lower mids, are also extremely nice. I really like male vocals and such on the ER2XRs. Female vocals are quite forward also. They can sometimes sound a bit forward. So this is where the Etymotic diffuse field tuning starts to come into play. The upper mids to treble region have some sort of rise in them, and this rise can feel a bit straining to some ears. To my ears, which are quite sensitive to upper mids and treble, I don't really mind this rise even. I think I got annoyed by it a little bit early on, especially if I didn't get the fit quite right. If I didn't insert these quite properly, it will sound even worse than what it normally should sound like. So if you feel like the ER2XRs just are a bit too shouty and they're just a bit too stringent in those upper mids, just try to insert them properly. Get a better seal. Try to just insert them deeper into your ears, which you have to do with these. These go very deep into your ears, like deeper than anything you've ever used, I bet. And yeah, so not a lot of things to say anymore about the mid-range. We'll just go straight into treble. Treble is probably the region where when I first listened to these, I completely hated the treble in these. The treble in these felt a bit, they were a bit, how do I say this? They were a bit harsh. They didn't sound very smooth, and they are not that smooth. They are kind of smooth, but not really. There's just a slight harshness that you'll feel occasionally. It doesn't annoy me a lot of the times nowadays. I've gotten used to them. But early on when I was using these, I got annoyed very frequently with how the treble was presented. When I kept using them, I got sort of adjusted to these. It didn't annoy me as much, but treble is definitely not the smoothest in this price range even, or in general. So if you are a treble head that really likes smooth treble, you want absolutely no sibilance whatsoever to be present in your treble, you might want to avoid these. These are not the worst case scenarios that I've heard. Like, I've heard a lot worse, especially in this price range and below, but yeah, I had to just convey that. Treble speed, no issues. It's not the fastest treble in the world, but I think they do quite well. I think in terms of speed in the treble, I think these are quite okay. And yeah, extension is also okay-ish. They don't extend that well. I think to my ears, they start falling off at around like 15k-ish. Let me just check my notes. Like they sort of peak at 15k, they dip sort of at 12k if I remember correctly. And yeah, after 15k they just start dropping off immediately. They just nose dives. And with my ears, they stop at like 17k, but even then, that I still notice sometimes if I have music that just goes way beyond that range. Also, that dip at 12k kind of kills the airiness in the treble. So that's something that we're gonna get into next. So we're gonna be talking about the soundstage and imaging of the ER2XRs, which is any Etymotic's downfall. It is their bane of their existence. It is their it's just their it's the Achilles heel of the ER2XRs. I don't even need to have my usual head graph. The soundstage of the Etymotics, okay? If this were my head, the soundstage of the Etymotic, how much do you think that would be? Basically nothing. They would basically be just like a teeny tiny circle inside your head. They have barely any soundstage, if at all. And the reason behind that, I'll tell you, is because the ER2XRs, they isolate extremely well and they go very deep into your ears. When I say they go very deep into your ears, this whole stick, nearly the whole thing goes into my ears when I use the Etymotic ER2XRs. They go very deep into your ears. They isolate very well. Maybe too well even. I can barely hear anything when I use the ER2XRs, which is a good point most of the time, but sometimes when I have delivery or something waiting for me, they can kind of get bad if I don't respond to them, because I couldn't hear them when I was using the ER2XRs, which is my bad, I suppose. It is my bad, but you get my point. And isolation plays quite a big part in terms of soundstage and imaging and how you perceive it. The better the isolation, usually the soundstage will be smaller, especially with something that sounds a bit more forward like the ER2XRs. This will be especially it'll just be even more intimate than a normal IEM would be if they had less intimate or less forward sound. Now, imaging wise, well, although the soundstage might be basically non-existent, they have okay-ish imaging. I wouldn't say they are the best, but that's also because, well, the soundstage is so small. It's kind of hard to tell where stuff is coming from when the soundstage is so small. I am able to still perceive sounds in terms of like 60-ish degree accuracy, so I can just tell the general direction of where sound is coming from. When I listen to binaural audio, this kind of comes into as a benefit because binaural audio is usually recorded in a way that the microphones are in your ear. So this does make binaural audio sound quite nice, and I think that imaging of binaural audio is better on these than on normal non such deep insertion IEMs. So if you're into that, these might do the job for you. And especially because of that isolation, you just feel like you're just in another world. It just feels completely different. It's just you and your music and nothing else. It's kind of disorienting sometimes, and talking with the ER2XRs in my ears makes me feel a bit off. I often speak very loudly and a bit unclearly when I use the ER2XRs when I try to talk. But yeah, that just falls to like case by case, from person to person. But yeah, so now speaking of the ear tips, we'll just get into build quality and accessories, and we'll just talk about the ear tips that you get with these. So the ear tips that you get with these are obviously the Etymotic triple flanges. These are just the classic, very deep insertion, the ear virginity destroyer. They're quite pliable, they're quite flexible, but they do get very dirty very quickly. If you have not noticed, this ear tip used to be just clear. They have tinted a bit yellowish due to my usage. I might need to get replacements for them. These are the large sized Etymotic ear tips, triple flange tips. It's kind of funny that normally I use medium-sized ear tips, so that is what I kind of guessed would have been what I would have needed to use in order to get the best seal. But it seems that using a larger size made them fit into my ears better. Using these smaller sized ear tips, and because they're smaller, they are a bit harder than the larger ones, and they just didn't fit me quite well. The isolation wasn't as good, the fit wasn't as good, the bass wasn't really that well presented, and the upper mids were a bit shouty, more shouty than they should be, and overall it just didn't fit my ears quite well. So when I changed to the large ear tips, everything just started sounding better. Isolation was absolutely excellent, and even the fit felt better. It didn't hurt as much. And now that my ears have adjusted to these ear tips, I don't really feel that much pain at all, unless during insertion and, well, pulling out. Especially if you have dry ear canals like my ears. If you have like more liquid earwax, you'll probably be a bit fine, because you'll have some lubrication when you're inserting these into your ears. And speaking of which, you should often clean these ear tips, because otherwise they will just get very dirty and they'll just pull out all the earwax in your ears, all of these spots. These are not manufacturing defects. This is just all the earwax that I have in my ears. My earwax is just very hard, so and flaky, so it just gets everywhere in those ear tips, and that's kind of nasty, not gonna lie. So if your ears do fit with the normal medium-sized ear tips, these will still pull out your earwax all the time, but they at least won't start yellowing as quickly, from my experience of using Etymotics. Aside from that, you also get this very nice small pouch from the Etymotics. You also get this sort of like clip that you can clip onto the splitter, which I really like. I don't really use these often because I don't go outside as much nowadays because, well, COVID, obviously. And aside from that, from the box itself, you also actually get foam ear tips and such in the package. And I believe they are supposed to actually... Normally, Etymotics, if you buy the ER2XRs and such, they will actually give you a measurement of your particular unit with a serial number. You don't get that with these, and the ear tips that you get are indeed only the medium and large ear tips, and you just get a pair of foam ear tips and just some replacement filters. Okay, these foam ear tips, I believe, are the medium-sized Etymotic foams. The Etymotics for foams wise, they sound the best with the Etymotic foams. Using any other foam, and I've made some custom foams for the Etymotics also. These sound the best in terms of foams. They reduce the treble only ever so slightly, like barely any reduction in the treble. Bass response, etc., they remain all the same like they do in the triple flanges. I just prefer the triple flanges because of, well, I don't have to compress them every time I use them, so I just use those triple flanges. And you get this filter replacement kit. Okay, one thing to note about the filter replacement kit is that the Etymotics, you can replace the filters in the ER2XRs, and they even have this, they sell this filter kit where you can tune the sound of the ER2XRs or ER2SEs to whatever you would like to a certain extent, obviously, but removing these filters will break them, so don't do that too often. Now, aside from all this, quick comparisons. Moondrop Starfield, get the hell out. The Moondrop Starfields sound like they have measured more bass, but to me, the ER2XRs feel like they have more punch and more slam in the bass, and they just feel like they actually have more. The isolation in the ER2XRs is also very handy. Soundstage, the Starfields will beat these any day. I mean, the Etymotics don't have any soundstage, basically. They only have some soundstage. It's better than what the ER4XR had, but yeah. Detail retrieval, I will say, is on par. I think for this price, it's quite good. Like, I can't complain about the detail retrieval as such. They get the basics down. The technicalities, overall technicalities, and tonality is just excellent. Against the Starfield, again, the Starfield is a lot more comfortable. Especially if you are just starting off using IEMs and you don't like stuff being stuck into your ear very deeply, I think these Starfields will fit you better. But if you don't mind the Etymotic fit, if you like big bass, you would like a more, to me, a bit more warm sound and a bit less, clinical. Like, they have a bit more warmth overall in the bass and the mid-range, but the treble does sound a bit harsh. If you don't mind that, I think the Etymotics will fit you well, especially if you have kids or if you have a noisy environment. The Etymotics, I believe, are an essential part of your audiophile experience, because they will just help you tremendously in those environments. And aside from that, against something like that's a lot more expensive, the T-Audio Legacy 4s, which are $200-ish, I believe detail retrieval and technicalities is still on par. The Legacy 4s has a bit more speed on its side, and the bass overall texture-wise, the ER2XRs just beat those by a mile. I like the bass of the ER2XRs a lot better. The mid-range is thicker on the ER2XRs. The Legacy 4s have a bit of a thinner mid-range. Separation, I believe, in the Legacy 4s is a bit better than the ER2XRs, but not by much. But for an additional $100, I don't think the Legacy 4s is worth it. And especially if you can be comfortable with the fit of the ER2XRs, get these. No questions asked. So yeah, that concludes my review. So subscribe if you would like more content like this. Like if you liked it. Comment what you think. And I'll leave what Brian thinks of the ER2XRs at the end of this video. See you guys next time.